Hello, and welcome back to the Free on the Inside podcast. Straight from the pages of Cosmo Girl Magazine 2004, Valeria Salazar joins us today to share her amazing testimony. Valeria was your average young adult struggling to get through college when her life took an unexpected turn. Finding herself in federal prison, Valeria thought her chances of having a successful life and career were over. But God stepped in. Valeria's story is a testimony of trauma, struggle, and hardships, but she kept going. Through God's providence and Valeria's persistence and resolve, she not only achieved her dreams, but surpassed them. Her story reminds us that no matter where we are, God still sees us, and when we surrender our lives to Him and follow Him, He works all things together for our good. Now, here's your host, Donna Sparks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Free on the Inside podcast. It is a blessing to be back with you again today, and I thank you, as always, for tuning in. Today, I have a very special guest with me. You may have read her testimony in Cosmo Magazine in 2004, but today she is here to share it with us personally, and so I just want to welcome Valeria Salazar to our show today. And Valeria, we just cannot wait to hear what you have to share with us today. So I'm just going to give you the liberty to say what God's put on your heart.
Hi, and thank you. And I can honestly say that I'm also very excited to see what God decides to share today because I have no idea. But here I am. I just really want to start by saying that I truly believe that that this has been in the works for a very long time. When I was released from prison, and I will get into that story, that was in 2005. And so here we are 20 years later. And in that little magazine article that in Cosmo Girl, I was interviewed inside the federal prison for that magazine. And I really felt the need to reach out to others to help them understand the dangers of certain lifestyles because I was very young when I was imprisoned. And it was rough because even though it was very well intended, it really kind of backfired on me personally. My family was very upset that I did that. They had kept my imprisonment a secret until told everybody that I was in college. And so when that came out, I was already in prison, and it was kind of like kicking a dog while they're down. It's just a lot of you're inconsiderate, this, that, the other. And I'm not gonna lie, it really did keep me from sharing my story after. And then as I started getting into the field of work that I'm in, and here it comes. The truth is coming. No, that really is the reason why I hadn't shared my story, is because of how bad it went the first time that it did. And I'm realizing just right now as I'm talking to you that I had really convinced myself that I wasn't sharing it because of this altruistic reason of I didn't want people to see me and where I am now and judge my fellow brothers and sisters who have shared in this painful journey as not wanting it bad enough or not pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. And so this is something that I didn't want to share for that reason. And yeah, I think that's not a lie. That was in here. But what God is revealing to me literally right now is that I was also very scared of another backlash, of being judged. And I'm just grateful that I'm not scared today because I'm right here in front of you. I am a 44-year-old woman. I was born into a lot of poverty, a split home. My father wasn't there. He left when I was 2 years old. But I don't. He was very abusive towards my mother. They married very young, and he had a daughter. He had two kids. My sister, my oldest sister, who's a huge part of my testimony, and I were 4 years apart. He married my mother in Mexico and brought her here. And then, was very abusive and ultimately had an affair and another pregnancy. And my mom decided to leave him. So it ended up with me and my sister and my mom growing up in extreme poverty. We lived in the projects, we in the worst parts of town, and not because my mom didn't work. She worked a lot. She was also an immigrant and didn't really know English, and so she worked a lot, but we were very poor, and I suffered a lot as a child because I was left under the care of my sister, who was only 4 years older than I was. And she struggled a lot with mental health issues. In hindsight, I can see because she experienced a lot of the violence that I didn't because I was smaller. And also, she was highly parentified. Whenever my mom, was alone, it was my sister. I would remember going to the doctor and she would translate. She was like 7 years old, translating for doctor appointments and helping my mom with Medicaid applications and food stamp applications and enrolling me in school and going to PTA. I mean, she was the parent at a very young age. And that was a blessing, but it also was very hard for me because she was extremely physically abusive, very. She didn't know better, in hindsight. But my earliest memory is, her getting frustrated while giving me a bath and putting my head underwater. And so there's been a whole slew of things that have happened in my life, but that was kind of the environment that I grew up in. And so I really just tried to, I was really trying to prove that I was good because I just felt like if I was a good kid, it would stop. Because I would be hit and beat and berated. My mom kind of played into that as well. She didn't know better, but if I was to go to school and come back with a ketchup stain on my shirt, it was a huge deal. I'm inconsiderate. I'm stupid. I don't care of the fact that, I have to work so much to get you those clothes. Uh, I tried to kill myself when I was 8 years old. How bad does your life have to be that you want to take your life at 8? Now that I have two kids, one is 7 and one is 9, I look at them and I think, wow, how? Right? And so even though there's a lot of blanks in my memory of my childhood, I remember that I know that much. It was very bad. Um, I was perfect student, teacher's pet, everything at school, but at home, I just was not good enough. I was also raised during that time, I was raised Jehovah's Witness. And that was very difficult for me because always as a kid, I felt like that version of God, and I'm not, trying to knock any religion by any way, but that God, it didn't, it just didn't fit what I felt he was, and also that religion, made me experience a lot of bullying at school because could not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I could not participate in anything that was Easter, Christmas, anything that was related to a holiday. I couldn't have friends unless they were Jehovah's Witness, and we would move around so many times. In my elementary years, I had one friend. That was the only friend that I was allowed. I still remember her first and last name. That was very, very, very hard, to grow up that way. Um, and so I just always felt like, oh, and not to mention this paranoia that everyone is doomed unless they're Jehovah's Witness. And so I would meet incredible, beautiful people, and then I would feel sad that they were not going to be saved, and it was just very, very difficult. Um, fast forward in my adolescent years, that's kind of when you start to look at things and say, hey, this isn't right. I shouldn't be treated this way. I'm just a kid. And so you go into the rebellious. Well, at least I did. I started smoking pot, sneaking out of the house. Um, I was very, very meek, very shy, very quiet. That turned into being somebody that was very outspoken and fiery and accusatory towards others and defensive. And I was a fighter, physically a fighter. I was tired of getting beat up. I remember there was so many times when I literally feared for my life because my sister was a lot bigger than me. I was this tiny little thing, and she was literally a lot taller and very, very heavy. And there were many times where I would think, this is it. I am going to die. She is going to kill me, because it would just be me and her, and there was no one there. And, but it was, she would flip the switch and suddenly just get tired of hitting me. And then it was, hey, let's have a sandwich and watch the Smurfs. And, I was just happy that she was happy, so I would do it, right? But it was just kind of this back and forth. But then as I got older, I started fighting back. And I started fighting back towards her, but I also started fighting the world. And when I started high school, in freshman year, I got into 3 fights my first week. Now, I will say that I didn't initiate any of them, but nevertheless, because and they knew that. So the first one, it was like, sorry that you got beat up. The second one was, okay, it's the second one, so you're gonna have to receive a suspension. But then that very next day, they hadn't determined how long I was going to be suspended. There was a third one. So I was getting attacked because I went to a high school that didn't pertain to the middle school that I went to. I don't know, kid stuff. You're from the rival school, so they're going to beat you up or whatnot. And this was the rough west side of San Antonio. So it was that those are the kind of kids, and I was one of them. So I ended up getting expelled. And of course, my family was just really upset, because back in the day, there wasn't a charter school that you could go to. If you get expelled from school, you lose the year. No other school will take you in. So what they decided was to send me to Mexico, because my grandparents were there, and both sets of grandparents lived in Mexico. So they sent me to Mexico. I remember I was extremely upset. I was threatening to jump out of the car. I did not want to go. And so they had to put the child locks. I was 14, just leaving everything, and going to Mexico. So I went to Mexico, and I think that was probably the best thing that could have happened to me at that time, because, yeah, even though I still continued in my little rebellious attitude, it was not so exacerbated, because I was not being threatened daily, at home. My grandparents, both sets of grandparents, were very loving and very supportive. My grandmas, they're everything to me. They're rest in peace, but they really were my source of strength. And I talk about, when I talk to friends, I talk about how God really puts people in your life to get you through those most difficult moments. And if it wasn't for my grandmothers, I don't think that I would have made it, because they were what I now call a competitive truth. And what that is when everything in the world is telling you that you're not good enough, and that you're unlovable, um, someone can, through an experience, can prove to you that that is not the truth. And now they become a competitive truth to the truth that the world has shown you. So those are my earliest competitive truths. They would keep me going, because whenever I was young and I lived in the United States and I was suffering, like I said, I tried to kill myself at 8 years old. What would keep me going is, okay, but Christmas, I'm gonna go be with grandma, and then I come back, and I would be so scared to come back, but spring break in 3 months, I'm gonna go be with grandmas. And in the summer, I'm gonna go be with grandmas. So I would hold on to that hope. And that's what kept me going. They were my angels. And so I was there. I ended up staying. It was only supposed to be a year, but I just loved the love that I was getting. And that doesn't mean I was perfect. I was still kind of, I was oppositional, but they loved me anyway. And they didn't hit me, and they didn't, they just loved me. And so I stayed. I stayed. I did all of high school over there. And and then I decided to come back at the age of 19 to go to college. And so that is when this kind of prison thing started. So I got back here in 2000. I'm sorry, when I was 19 years old, I came back, and I didn't feel like I could start college right away, but I knew that I wanted to work and kind of see what was going on. So I decided to do medical assistant, like a certification in medical assistant. And I was also working at yeah, I don't know if you, I'm sure Donna, you know, but remember back in the day, you people would call 411 when you needed a phone number because
Oh yeah.
there was no Google,
Right.
right? And so I was a 411 operator, and I would, find addresses and phone numbers and give them to people. And that's where I met this young guy. His name was Brian. And I had never really had a serious relationship. I was also still very naive. I mean, I was a little Mexican girl. I mean, even though I'm American, but I was primarily raised over there, so just very innocent in regards to, I guess, street smarts. Even though I grew up in the street, I was still. It's hard to explain, but this guy, he was from New Jersey. He was tall, he was white, and I know that sounds silly, but for me, a little Mexican girl is like, oh, this white guy is looking at me. That's how my mind thought. He was a pastor's son. He was really smart. He was in law school, pre-law at UTSA, and he just was like embodied. I just enamored with him and the fact that he was interested in me and all of the things that he would tell me were just things that my soul needed to hear in that moment. Just a lot of love, and I just wasn't used to that. And we got pretty serious. We eventually moved in together, but I remember he introduced me to raves, like parties, overnight parties. And I had never been to one. But he was so advanced. Again, he was from Jersey. He used to spend time in New York. He was just this charming guy. I'm like, yeah, I'll go with you. And so we went, and I took ecstasy for the first time. It was a whole other world. It was so in my mind. It was love and just experiencing this amount of nurture that I'd never experienced. Blah blah blah. So I was enamored with that lifestyle. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna not hold myself accountable. I really liked that. I felt like I had found a community. And, these parties, it's all about dancing and happiness. And then when the ecstasy hits, it's all about love and everyone's, I love you and all. And so it was love that I was looking for in hindsight. But I just really kind of kept going there. And he started selling ecstasy, and then he started selling other harder drugs. I come from a family that, well, my dad actually was in prison during this time for drugs. Him and two of my uncles. And so, there was some involvement there on my family. And so I knew some people. And the magazine article, although I love it, I was very transparent with them when I explained my role in terms of when he wanted to start selling cocaine, and it was supposed to be a one-time deal. That is true, and it was to pay off some debts that he had, and there was not any ecstasy coming in through Florida, which is where we would go get it. It was kind of dry, and we supplied Texas State. I mean, when I'm talking about universities, it's the university kids that go to raves. And so they would get it from us. And so that was dry, and he needed a way to make some money. And one of his friends said, hey, I've got a buyer for a kilo of Coke. Do you know where to get it? And him knowing my family, I had never involved that. Like the selling of the ecstasy was all stuff that was done with him. But I thought, okay, well, maybe I might be able to make a phone call, and I did, and it did happen because I knew the people,
Oh,
and I
wow.
know that the magazine doesn't state that because that was
No.
actually never, I think they really wanted to paint me a little bit like a little bit more innocent,
Right.
and I understand the message that they were trying to give, right? Like you could be perfect and still this happens to you.
Mhm.
But, when I read it, it was a little different, from
Yeah,
what I told them.
when I read
Yeah.
it, I mean, it
Yeah.
literally looked like it was all his fault.
No, that's not the case. I really did have an involvement, but I will say that I was naive to that being a crime. I know that sounds silly, but in my mind, if I wasn't directly the seller, and all I did was give a phone number, and after that they're taking care of it, and I don't even know who it is that they're dealing with.
Mhm.
I'm not the criminal, right? That's I was young. I was 19.
Mhm.
Um and so anyway, so fast forward, so we get it ends up happening. But one thing about me is that I never went with him on any of his escapades, like when he would pick up drugs and stuff like that. And this cocaine one was the first one with cocaine, but it was no different. I was not going to go. The only reason why I went is because especially because it was finals week, and I was at my last semester at San Antonio College getting an associate's because I wanted to be a nurse. So getting all my prerequisites met. And I was very diligent with school. It always, no matter how hard I partied, even as a child, no matter what I was struggling with at home, I was always a straight A student. I took education very serious. So I was especially not going to go because of that, but there was a huge flood in San Antonio, and it all campuses were closed, and it was 4th of July. And so I went. And ironic, 4th of July is the day I lost my freedom. So, we go, and we're driving, and I do thank God because I remember that he wanted to bring a gun. And I told him, if you bring a gun, I will not go. And he insisted and insisted. And I said, I will not go. And I'm glad. I wish I hadn't gone, but I'm glad he didn't bring the gun, because if a gun had also been found, that would have been at least another 10 years automatic. And so I am at least glad that I stood my ground in that regard. But yeah, we get there, and the deal was supposed to be made um um at the it was like it was a little hotel that was next to an Arby's, and I stayed in the car. He went out with his friend, the one that kind of told him, I can help you sell a key of Coke. So he's the kind of the one that facilitated it in terms of finding the buyer. And so I stayed in the car. And I remember telling him, like, oh, are you sure you want to do this? Like, we don't know this guy. Like, we knew Justin, but we didn't know the guy he was meeting. And just like that was true in the article. I just didn't feel right. And God, I wanted to turn around so bad. But Brian was incredibly charming and just such a good talker. And the guy could sell a warm blanket in the summer, let me tell you. And I was infatuated with him. And he assured me, he's like, it's fine, this is going to be fine. So anyway, he, he comes back, the deal was done. But then he tells me, guess what? They gave me a money for another one. And I just have to go get it, but they already prepaid it. And I remember telling him, what? Like this was just once, right? But he said, oh, don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. Well, we were driving out of the Arby's, and there all of a sudden the car in front of us, we're stopped at a red light. The car in front of us starts reversing, so kind of backing into us. The car behind us starts moving up, and we realize, okay, we're getting, this is an arrest, right? And these are undercovers. And he I don't know how he moves out of that lane and takes off on the highway. And he is going so fast, and there's cops and all kinds of stuff. Somehow he manages to lose them. And, I, it's, we get to a neighborhood, and it's like, everybody run, just run. And this is silly, but again, I was so diligent with school, and I also really thought, I'm not going to go to jail, so I have finals next week. So I reach over to the back seat, and I grab my backpack. The article says I grabbed my purse. I don't even remember having a purse, but I remember the backpack. So I grabbed my backpack and put it on, and I just ran. And I remember just my heart beating. I was running. I knew there was cops everywhere. I don't know where they went, but I ran into this home where their garage was open. And I get under the car, and I'm just, just like in a fetal position under a car. And I could hear them getting arrested. I could hear, you have a right to remain silent. I could also hear them looking and looking and looking for me. Three different police officers came into the garage, there was a little piece of me that was visible. And I knew when they came in, they were going to find me. They did not. Three times. And I remember after the third time, they said, "Oh, we don't know where she's at." You know, there was helicopters and they're like, "She'll pop up." And I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, did that actually just happen? Am I safe? Like, did I actually get away from the place?" I just remember thinking that. And in that moment, the owner of the home came into the garage and saw me immediately. And I hadn't moved from my stand, so I don't know how the cops didn't see me, but she did. And she said, "Salte de ahí, ¿qué estás haciendo?" That's in Spanish for, get out. And I remember feeling relieved that she speaks Spanish because I said, "Hey, like, please, no, no, please don't say anything. Please keep me safe. Like, please, please, please." And she said, "Nope." And she went out to the front and said, "She's right here." At that time, there was, I don't know, about 15 U.S. Marshals, U.S. Marshals. Um, and I'll tell you why it was U.S. Marshals, but at that point, it was not just cops, it was U.S. Marshals pointing their guns at me and telling me, to put my hands up. And so I remember that I tried to because I had my backpack like on me. So instead of putting my hands up, I tried to pull off my backpack to put it down and they cocked their weapons like they were ready to shoot me because I just, what, at that point, I dropped to my knees, backpack and all, with my hands up because I got so scared. I was 20, I just turned 21, but going on 16 in terms of just, I had no idea what the heck was going on, right? And they arrested me, and that was awful, just awful. But I also didn't realize what was going to happen. I still thought this is a big mistake. Once they find out, that blah, 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 I'm gonna be fine. And so I wasn't fine. I ended up, they do the arraignment that day, and I did not get bond because they felt that I was a flight risk because I had family in Mexico and because I literally gone to school in Mexico and I was there. And I remember trying to tell them, but I'm in college. I have finals. I've never been in trouble. I don't have a record. I came back from Mexico. I don't want to go like there. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm a good person. And they didn't care. So this was in Lubbock where this happened. And they took me to the county jail. And the county jail was in Spur, Texas. Um, that they ended up transferring me, to for that. And that's it. Like I never saw the light of day after that, because that's where I awaited my sentencing. And I can tell you that that was extremely difficult for me because county jail and it's, anybody that comes in, right? And I was this tiny little thing, again, 21 years old, but I looked like I was 15 or 16. And, you know, I remember there was a woman in there that was all over the news because she drowned her children. So I was in there with her. Um, I remember there was women that were addicted to crack and the crack was seeping out of their skin and they would pop the little pimple balls, but with stuff. And just there was a lot that I had not seen, right? Yeah, I grew up in a rough part of town, but it was a familiar rough part of town, and it was a very Hispanic part of town. So I was culturally kind of, but I was not. It was just very different. Um, and I remember I did not eat at all that first week. Like all I did was cry heavily, heavily. I did not eat. I didn't want to use the bathroom because it was this long pod where we all lived, and it was just basically this long room with like 24 beds, or maybe 30. I don't know, but like they're bunk beds and they're lined up. And then right next to the bunk beds are the showers and the toilets are literally out in the open. If you're in your bed or if you're in the table eating or playing cards, or if I mean, you're literally out in the open. And so I remember for a while taking a blanket and like a ghost, and covering myself just to use the bathroom. It was so rough, but I remember there was a woman, her name was Nisi. I will never forget this woman. People would say she was a crackhead, um, African American lady, hardly any teeth, um, was in there, for crack crack distribution and prostitution, the lowest by the world standards. She came up to me and she said, "Honey, I'm tired of seeing you cry." She said, "I've been trying to give you space to let it out, but that's enough. You're gonna hurt yourself." Um, and I told her, I said, I don't have anything to live for. I just want to cry myself to death. And she said, "Have you met Jesus?" And I didn't want to hear it. I said, "I know of Jesus, but Jesus is not going to help me." Because the religion that I grew up in, Jehovah's Witness, they don't deny Christ as the Son of God, but he is the Son of God only and not to be worshiped. You pray and worship Jehovah, right? So I didn't know Jesus in that way. Um, and she, but she would keep checking up on me, and she would make sure that I would eat, and even if it was a little bit. uh and then there was this ministry that would come to the prison, or to that particular prison, and it was every Saturday, and I wouldn't go. I was in extreme depression. I just couldn't do anything, and I didn't want to. And Nisi would always invite me. She never gave up inviting me. And it was like maybe 3 months in or so, um, that she said, "You really need to come. You're gonna like it. It's nothing but dancing and worship." And so I said, "Okay, fine, I'll go." And it was to my surprise, this tiny little woman that was probably, I mean, to me, she looked like she was 85 years old. I mean, and she was really, really old, okay? This little, and but she would come to the prison and she would bring gospel music. What I'm talking about, Mary and Kirk Franklin, and I remember that, I walked in to her ministry, like to and she started with the song "Shackles Off My Feet So I Can Dance," and I remember just seeing everybody just jumping and praising God, and the song was about, broke these chains so I can lift my hands, and then and it was all of these, like, just filled with the Holy Ghost, black women that would be jumping up and down. But then you see this tiny little white woman like leading it. And again, I'm this little Mexican in the Mexican bubble, so I've never seen anything like this, right? And I was just so moved, and I just felt so inspired and so happy. And I had never felt that way before. And I was hooked after that. I was hooked. I could not get enough. And Miss Nisi, I called her Miss Nisi, Miss Nisi just really took me under her wing. I ended up being in county for 9 months before I received my sentencing. So that was rough, because there was a lot of people coming in and out. Nisi was also there for a long time because she was awaiting a big charge, right? So those of us that were awaiting a big charge, were there for a while. Um, but she really took me under her wing, and she started just really ministering to me with the word of God. Um, I ended up getting baptized in a county jail in Spur, Texas. Um, the baptism happened at about 7 months in or so, and I had found this version of Christ that I did not even know existed. This unconditional love and acceptance, this faith, that things will work out together for good. I had no evidence at all that that was the case. Life had handed me nothing but heartbreak. I mean, there's other stuff that I completely skipped, during that child and adolescent stuff. There was other very harsh things, and then prison for me was a culmination of, okay, well, I guess I am a piece of nothing, right? And so just really starting to believe in the goodness of God, and that things would be better, and that things can be better right now. You don't have to wait until you're released. You can let him embrace you and feel him now. That got me through so very much. So Nisi was my second competitive truth, right? She was the one that saw me, even though I didn't want to exist, and was worried about me and looked after me. And even though I didn't want to go to church with her in the beginning, she wouldn't preach to me. She would just make sure that I was eating and that I was drinking. And then that whenever it was church every Saturday, she would say, "Hey, do you want to go this week?" But she wasn't like pushing it on me, but she never gave up. Right. And so I was so sad, believe it or not, when I was finally sentenced, and not well, obviously because of the sentencing, I had to plead guilty because they told me that um this is the way that they told me. They said that that particular district attorney really, really had it out for Justin, who was the person that kind of set up, it ended up being a setup deal. So Justin, the one that, told my boyfriend, "Hey, I have somebody that can buy a kilo if you know," he was actually an informant for the DEA because they had been looking for this big, big guy. And then Justin had been caught selling ecstasy, and they gave him a chance in exchange for information to who's getting you the ecstasy, right? And so he kind of, because there was no ecstasy, there was no deal for us to make at that moment. He still found a deal through the cocaine, right? And so imagine when we found out that he was an informant, because Justin was Brian's friend since elementary. So that was a big betrayal, right? But what my attorney at the time, the court appointed that I had in the beginning, what he said was, "They're going to give you the book." He said, if this had happened in San Antonio, you probably wouldn't even been arrested. You would have gotten probation because, yeah, there you made a phone call or whatnot, but you weren't involved in any of, like, you would have been fine. Here it's different. Apparently, not only were they looking for this big guy, so they were going to throw me all kinds of stuff so that I could give information, but also, and I never verified if this was true, but what they told me was that the particular judge that would be presiding over my case had lost a daughter to a drug overdose. And so he was not empathetic. He was not light on his sentencing. And so what they were telling me, and again, you have to remember, this is a girl that thought she wasn't going to go to jail that day, meeting with someone a week later, telling me I needed to plead guilty because if not, and I took it to trial, I would lose. And that would be a minimum of 10 years. And so what they were offering me was a guilty plea for 48 months in prison. And so, well, no, they didn't say the amount, but they said max 5 years, actually. And so to me, I thought, okay, I don't, I don't want to risk it. And it was minimum 10, but they said, 10 and up. And I just felt like I just had to plead guilty, and I did. I pled guilty to conspiracy to distribute 500 grams to 1 kilogram of cocaine and aiding and abetting. I did not even know aiding and abetting was a charge, but apparently it was. And so I pled guilty, so I knew that, but I was awaiting my sentencing. And so when I finally got the sentencing, it was 46 months that they sentenced me with. And then after that, they go ahead and take you from the county jail to a holding federal thing. It was in Houston. And then they take you to the actual prison. And so I was in prison in Bryan, Texas. It was a prison camp because I was a nonviolent offender that was sentenced to under 5 years. And so it was a prison camp. And when I got there, I was actually sad to leave the county jail because I had already been there for 9 months, and I really didn't want to leave Miss Nisi, and I was really afraid of where I was. I didn't know what was going to happen, where I was going to go, and I just I felt so alone. But I had no choice, right? So I was I was in the I was there when in the holding cell, And I remember they in the holding cell in that transfer center in Houston. I remember there was this one police officer or this guard that told me, you know, you're never gonna get a real job, right? And I just remember looking at her and she's like, yeah, you're done. You're done. You messed up. You're never gonna get a job. You're never gonna amount to anything. I hope you're proud of yourself. Man, that hurt. That hurt so much because it was everything that I felt people thought of me before I got arrested, that I was trying to prove them wrong about, etc. And then hearing her say that after I had that big mess up, I felt like, yeah, you know, I guess that's true. Like again, I got demoralized, even though I had the Spirit of Christ, you know, just leaving and just okay. But then in that holding cell, someone just telling me that to my face. I was a very baby Christian. And so naturally, it made me lose a lot of hope, right? And made me very scared of what was going to come. But I went to the prison camp in Bryan, Texas. It's right next to College Station. And there were some new competitive truths there, you know, you know, as I had Miss Nisi and God made sure I had another competitive truth, another angel. I remember that I was in the federal prison for about 8 months. And I had just really gotten into just reading the Word of God. I started, that's how I passed my time is just reading, and going to church services. And I joined their choir because I love to sing. But you know, I was still very alone. But I would read, and I read the entire Bible. I have a crazy intellect too, and I read very fast and I process things very fast. But I remember I read it and it just kind of it spoke to me in so many ways, and just really reading it from beginning to end really helped me understand the New Testament and really helped me understand Christ in a very different way from what I had been taught. And so just it helped me to believe in God's providence, even though I didn't know it was called providence, because the way that I could see like the stuff in the New Testament, how it had been kind of lined up thousands of years before, and it's just like this belief that in the end things will be okay, right? And so that my own self-study was helping me. It was hard though. It was hard because there was other, you know, there's naturally women there that, you know, might not like you, might not get, you know, fights, you know, this, that, the other. But for the most part, I can honestly say that it wasn't a horrendous experience. And I think that it was because I was just engulfed in the Word of God, and it would help me see things through a different lens. And so about 8 months in, we got this new chaplain. The church that I was going to there it's a ran by a Lutheran pastor, and he was amazing. You know, in a very Lutheran way, right? Just very calm, all of that. So, but I still was very diligent in going, and there was no choir then. I take that back. But then about 8 months in, we got this new chaplain, and her name is Chaplain Lede. And I don't know if maybe one day she hears it. I have looked for her, Demetria Lede. All I know is that she has a book that she published on Amazon of poems, and it makes sense because she went in, and let me tell you, she was a firecracker. She was a little bit shorter than me, super thin. She was she was African American, but she was from Louisiana. She's very light skin with like green eyes, but full of the Spirit of God, and the way that she would. And the reason why it may be interesting that I bring up people's skin color and ethnicity, but it to me that I would notice those things because again, I grew up in a very sheltered like cultural bubble, you know, so it was the first time I was exposed to so many different kinds of people, right? And so I was um she would have service, and she was like when you think about people like these poets that get up and like do like spoken word, and it's just like very dynamic and very hip. um she would preach like that. It was so unorthodox, something I had never seen before. She was cool, like she was hip. she was also only, I think, 26 at the time. And at the time, I was about 22. And when I met her, 22, 23, she had a doctorate in theology. She was high ranking in the military. I think she was 27. And I remember the first time I saw her, the first time I saw her preach, the first time I thought to myself, what the heck are you doing with your life? Like, you can do that, like she is amazing, and I had never had a positive role model, like somebody that was kind of my age, that wasn't, overly religious, but was cool and doing amazing things. I had never had that. I never seen that. So I was just really attracted to her from that regard. But I was also kind of starstruck and intimidated, believe it or not. And I didn't want to, because after her services, she would have a line of people that wanted to talk to her. She was that infectious, right? And so I just never had the courage really to stand in line. But one day I was in the cafeteria eating, and one thing that I love about her is that she would minister to everyone, even just to check in. She would go and sit with the Muslims and have lunch with them all day. And then for dinner, she would go outside in where the Wiccans would have their little Wiccan circle. And she would just go out there, and you could see that she would very respectfully say hi, and they exchange laughter, and then come back. She was not judgmental, even though, I'm sure that she probably, I mean, definitely as a reverend, doesn't participate in those faiths, but she loved them and included them anyway. Very different from my Jehovah Witnesses upbringing, right? So that too was so different to me. And I remember I used to admire that, and I used to wonder, like, why is she talking to the Muslims and the witches? She's a Christian. I couldn't understand, right? I didn't understand this concept of unconditional love and grace, even within the religious community. But nevertheless, she was embodying what Christ would do, right? And people, they would come to her for counseling sessions, or when they were feeling down. Like, it would be amazing seeing somebody in a hijab, talking to Chaplain Lede and getting, just strength and encouragement from her. It was just, but one day I was in the cafeteria, and she came and sat next to me, and she said, I've had my eyes on you for a while. She's like, she said, you're very quiet. She said, but something tells me there's a fire in your soul. And I just felt, first of all, I can't believe she's talking to me, right? But she ended up like really taking me in to talk about like my new Miss Nisi. Um, this woman started teaching me and inspiring me and encouraging me and just telling me, pointing out all my strengths, and pointing out my gifts. Um, and then we started writing poetry together, and she was there, and she got me through that area. And then when I read the Bible again, slowly this time, right, to digest it, she would help me with different scriptures and Bible studies, and one-to-one, one-on-one. She gave me just very individual attention, more than anyone else. It was very, it was pretty amazing. um and then she ended up being relocated because she was a military chaplain. And I remember I had her for 2 years, but I still had about 8 months left in my sentence, and I was just so sad, and just very sad. I remember the last day that she was there, she anointed my head with oil, and she prayed over me, and she just prayed that the doors that needed to be open, and the doors that needed to be closed for the rest of my life, but that I shall fulfill his mission to love the world and show the world what love is. And I remember that stood with me. I didn't wash my head for like 2 weeks because I didn't want to wash the oil. And so I was, pretty stinky. And finally, I decided to wash my hair. Um, but I had some sisters in Christ that I was a part of now, and we got through it together. And I was released. I was released back to San Antonio to a halfway house. Um, and I just had this idea, this thought that everything was going to be great. That it was the worst part was over, and I had met Jesus, and so now all the doors are going to be open, and I'm going to fulfill his mission because I took it very concrete, very literally. I wasn't as spiritually savvy, I guess, and I was a very green Christian. There's a new God that but that was not the case by far. I was met with the reality of being a convicted felon. And the first thing that I wanted to do, well, first of all, I couldn't get a job anywhere because I was in a halfway house, but they would connect you with, places that would hire you. And so I was sent to work at a hotel, just as a receptionist. I was very grateful for that. Like, I'm like, okay. So it was a little hotel called Roadway Inn, downtown San Antonio, kind of rough area, but not too rough. But I was a thug. I was raised in rough areas. So it's one thing about me, nothing scares me, nothing. And so I started working there, and the 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 owner also just kind of noticed me and asked me. He's like, what do you plan to do with your life? And I said, well, I have no idea. And he said, you really should go back to school. You really, really should go back to school. And I told him that, I didn't know how I would do that. So he happened to be on the board of a major university, well, of a Christian, Catholic university. It's called University of the Incarnate Word. But the reason why I say major is because it's a big deal in San Antonio. It's a known university. It's a private university, very expensive university. But he was on the board, and he told me, he's like, I can help you get a scholarship. He's like, you have to finish your undergraduate, like you have to finish your basics because I got arrested before I finished my final. So I didn't finish that semester. He said, but after that, he's like, I can help you. It's not gonna pay for everything, but it can help you a little bit. And so then I was very excited. But then when I went to apply for financial aid, I wasn't eligible, to finish my basics in the community college I was going to. I wasn't eligible because of my drug conviction. And so I did not know that the federal application for federal student aid called FAFSA has that question if you've ever been convicted of a felony involving drugs. And if the answer is yes, you're not eligible for Pell Grants or any of that, which to me doesn't make sense because you want people to come back into society and reintegrate themselves. But yet you block them from accessing education. And me being, because I've always been a fighter, right? And so I don't give up easily, and that's just one thing about me. And so I thought to myself, there's got to be more to this. I'm not accepting this. So I started looking into it and looking into it and looking into it. And sure enough, there is a loop, not a loophole, but there's a little caveat that they don't advertise. It's printed in very fine print at the back of the page. I promise, even today, you'll find it, but you have to really look. And it says that if you have completed a residential drug rehabilitation program and you can provide evidence of such, then you get the financial aid. And so while I was in prison, I was enrolled in something called RDAP. I don't know if it still exists, but it's Residential Drug Abuse Program. And it was a 9-month, very intense therapy, just intense program, a rehab, And so I was able to contact the prison, and I was able to get the certification of completion, and I was able to send it into the federal government, and I was able to get financial aid. But again, that's kind of one of those things why I hadn't wanted to really share this part, the prison part, is because there's so many barriers, right? And I just find myself very lucky that I somehow had the insight or the curiosity to look into that more. But the reality is that nobody does that. Like if you're filling out an application and then it says if you've ever been convicted of a crime, you're not eligible. Okay, you're just not eligible, right? And that's the case. There's a lot of things that really block this reintegration into society, and I could get on that soapbox all day long, but
But Valeria,
I was,
it just proves to me that that was the hand of the Holy Spirit. It's just like you were talking about
mm,
providence. God was
amen.
leading you even to look at the fine print. And
Wow.
even by sharing this today, you are opening the door for other people to realize that they can do that. This is providence.
Yes.
That's how God
Oh my
works.
goodness. Thank you for saying that because that just makes my heart so happy. Yes, just really key. Don't take no for an answer. There's a way. There is a way. And if not, God makes a way,
Amen.
right? And that is for sure been evident in my life. And so I was able to get into that university. I finished my basics. I could not be a nurse. Well, maybe not, but I didn't want to risk it because what they said, it highly likely you wouldn't be able to get licensed as an RN because of your drug conviction. And so I thought to myself, okay, I've done all of these basics and like medicine, biology, this, that, the other. So what can I transfer those to? And that particular university had a degree called in a bachelor's in nuclear medicine. And what it was is training you to be able to do like MRIs and CAT scans and stuff like that. You actually need a bachelor's for that. It's very science based. And all of my prereqs would fulfill that those 2 years, right? So I wouldn't have to fall behind. No, I did I think 2 semesters of that, and I could not handle the math and the physics. It was just too much. So then I remember just really just taking a deep dive and thinking, what do I really want to do? I believe that my time in prison was necessary because it exposed me to the people, the world, right? I was very in my bubble and I met so many people. I could write books and books and books about the amazing stories. What I learned there is that everyone has a story. And the more people I talked to, the more I was just blown away by their circumstances and what it is that got them there. And some really were innocent, and some were big, big, big troublemakers. But regardless, they all had a story. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only one that had life handed to them really, really early on. I wasn't the only one that was just caught in bad circumstances or that happened to have a prosecutor or a judge that lost a daughter and so was, you know, healing themselves through the punishment of others. And, I got to know so many people and became very interested in people and their story. So I thought to myself, I want to be a counselor. I want to be a therapist of sort. I want to do something like that. So like I decided to go to get my bachelor's in psychology at that university. And then uh, I was was going to pursue a PhD, but I did it because I found that, for psychology, you have to be a psychologist to be a therapist. And so that is a PhD. But then I was going to, but then I learned about social work. And what I learned about social work was that you have to get a master's degree, you have to get advanced training. So it's still a very lengthy process, but you can become a therapist with a master's degree. That was attractive to me, but also the social work aspect of it, right? The community and helping others, the underserved. It felt right. But however, when I got out of, I'm sorry, when I finished my bachelor's degree, um, I could not find a job anywhere, even with a bachelor's degree. Um, it was it was so heartbreaking because I felt like, what do I need to do, for this stigma to go away? I'm trying to do better and nobody cares, right? Like I'm trying to help here. Um, and I remember I had a job as I finally got a job as an interpreter over the phone and for 3 months I worked and I never got paid. I was on federal probation. So after the halfway house, I had 5 years of federal probation. And so you got a call every day, and if they give you a color, and if that color comes up, you show up for random UAs, and you report monthly to probation officer, and they come visit you, and this, that, the other. And I wasn't working, and that did not look good, but I was trying, right? And here's my competitive truth number four, I think. There was a professor at Incarnate Word, and his name is Dr. V. And he was one of my psychology professors. And he I don't know why, um, saw me. And and then I met his wife, and she too was just this incredible woman. And for some reason, they both really liked me, you know? And when I could not find a job and they found out about it, Dr. V moved mountains to get me an interview at a place called the Center for Healthcare Services, which is the county, every county in Texas has a mental health authority. So it's like the licensed mental health authority where people that have severe mental illness go, and you typically they're underserved, you know, limited finance situations, et cetera, limited access to care. So it's a very big organization. There's one in every county. So for San Antonio, it was that. And I remember actually, no, it was at University of Texas at San Antonio. They were doing they were looking for a research recruiter, and they were going to pull the participants from the Center for Healthcare Services. So he had me apply at the UTSA because he knew the person there, and they interviewed me. They said they you know they really liked me, all of that. And I thought it was a sure deal, and they thought it was a sure deal because they knew they were going to be interviewing me and that I had a background. But they interviewed me anyway. They liked me. They wanted to hire me. They said, "Don't worry about that." I was so excited. And then I got the call. Yeah, it didn't make it. You know, the corporate or powers that be, I was not eligible for hire. And Dr. V was so sad because he felt like he had let me down, like he got me so excited. And you know, he said, you know, we'll figure something out. Um and then but then he got a phone, he called me like 10 minutes after we hung up, and he said that the university had called him and said, "Oh, we don't want to give up on her. She was so good. So we're thinking maybe she can get hired at CHCS, and she'll still be recruiting the research participants, but through them. And so it would require that they move that position over there, and that I get an interview over there, and that I get hired over there. It would require all of this movement. But I was just honored that they were trying to find a way to get me hired, right? And I think that's because he would push them and push them like, "You're making a big mistake. You need to hire. She's talented. She's smart," you know, and so they, you know, they ended up, I got a call to go do an interview at CHCS, and I show up for the interview a few weeks later, and the person that was going to supervise me apparently was out on surgery, and I got interviewed by the chief medical officer. Can you imagine how frightening that was? I mean, this is the highest of the
Wow.
highest person.
Right.
And I'm like, what in the world, right? So I'm hired and I'm being interviewed by the chief medical officer. And she liked, you know, she was like, "Okay, good, you know, very proper, you know." And like, "Yep, you seem to meet all the good. Okay, I'll go ahead and let them know that, yeah, I recommend you." And at this point, I just said, "Look, I just want to put it out there. I need you to know because I'm not even sure if you read my file. I am a convicted felon. I just served 4 years in federal prison. I'm still on probation. You know, I don't want to waste anybody's time." And she looked at me and she said, "Honey, I make the rules around here." She said, and she's like, "And you know what? I did know your background, and that's why I'm interviewing you." She said, "Not because I wanted to screen you out." She said, "I was interested in what you could bring." She said, she's like, "The fact that you're here after you've been through that, that is a work that is, what did she say, it was something like, it's a non, like it's not a regular job skill, you know, like having the knowledge or whatever." She said she called it something, I don't remember, but it was kind of like, "It's the character that I'm after, and you have that character that I need." And so I love her because she is this big doctor, like this prominent woman in not just the city, but she's written all these books and stuff. And for some reason, God had her interview me. And she then became a big helper because when I then applied to my social work, my master's, the that way it was difficult. It was hard for me to get in because of my family. And she would write me letters of recommendation. And when they came from her, people knew her, right? And so I had a letter of recommendation from her. I was golden. And so that was a divine connection right there. And again, this is what I mean when I say I don't ever like to share it because I'm so aware of all of the angels that got put in my path that made it happen. But yeah, I was able to go into social work school, and I became a licensed clinical social worker, and started in private practice, and um, and 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 so one of the things that I found was that I am right now currently I am the director of strategic business initiatives at a big behavioral health hospital. From a title perspective, that is the equivalent of it is the chief operating officer is what I do here. And I am now in a place where I am able to really affect change in the community, where I am able to bring systems together that normally don't work together for the betterment of people. And God, when you are in line with his purpose, will bring things to you. What I will say is it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be easy. But so as long as you keep your eyes on him, I promise the right people will come at the right time. And it's not always your time. And you might really want something and it doesn't happen, but there is a reason. Hindsight will always reveal that. It wasn't easy for me. I'm telling you about all my angels, but I also had a lot of tragedy. My sister ended up being killed by her husband, my sister, the one I've been talking about this whole time. I have faced so many trials after my stay in prison that I don't even consider that one the biggest one. And it was huge. It was horrible. But that just if I could put it into context that it doesn't have to be beautiful. And a lot of times, thank God it's not beautiful. Because if I am where I am today and so passionate and so zealous and honestly so influential in my community, I would not be that if I had not experienced all of these terrible tragedies that started when I was a baby, and then all of those closed doors that happened when I got out of prison needed to happen. Why? Because I wasn't supposed to be a nurse. I wasn't supposed to be in nuclear medicine. I was supposed to be a social worker. I was supposed to be boots on the ground, helping people, the undeserved. The Bible says, I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison, you visited me. I was sick and you took care of me. And it's like, Lord, when did we not, when were you all of these things? And he said, in so much as you did it for the least of mine, you did it to me. And so I really believe that God is in the business of raising warriors, right? And warriors, you have to train, and in that muscle, it grows through tear
Yeah.
and through resistance, right? That's how you build muscle. It has to shred, but then it builds stronger, right? And so every trial, every tribulation that you face is 100% necessary for the next step that he has for you. And if you look at it that way, it doesn't mean you have to like it, right? It doesn't mean you have to enjoy it. But what will happen is that when you are grateful for everything that God brings you, good and bad, then that's what's going to keep going. And what will instill the gratitude is this concept of providence. All things work together for good for those who are loved, right? And for those whom love the Lord. And all you have to do is one thing. Jesus said, one commandment I leave you, that you love one another as I have loved you. And so I challenge you to not only apply that to other people, but remember that that also applies to you, to yourself. Love yourself. Sometimes we receive the love of God and we give the love of God, but do we love ourselves? Do we give ourselves love and receive love from ourselves? You can't love others. You can't pour from an empty cup. So I have grown so much spiritually, and that has helped me get to where I am at. It has been the grace of God, right? And his wisdom. But also it has really been this radical acceptance of whatever life brings. Because time and time again, the reason why I kept bringing those angels up, those competitive truths, the reason why I took so long on telling the story is because I wanted you guys to see how just when things would get horrible, suddenly somebody would show up and open a door that needed to be opened. And then boom, something horrible again, feeling discouraged, but keeping the faith, and something happened again. And so even today in this podcast is something that I had been praying for a while. I had just wanted a larger platform of sorts. I didn't know how that would be and for whom that would be, but I knew that I needed to speak. And I just didn't know how that would manifest. But I see that I'm here right now. And I hope that in the telling of my story, and for those of you who are listening, the main thing I feel, the reason why I shared that so much is I want you to look at the glimmers. I want you to look at those glimmers of hope that God really puts in your path. And I kind of really feel right now that you guys needed to hear that, because it's not rainbows and sunshines. When you get out of there, it's going to be rough. You're going to have a label. You're going to have to fight through it. But don't waste your time trying to prove yourself to others. You don't have to be proven. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. You are perfect already. You are chosen already. And your success, your life, your happiness is already done. Just align yourself with God's love, trust in his wisdom, no matter what, in the good and the bad, know that he is there. And I promise you will be joyous and happy regardless of what the world brings, because you know deep down in your soul that even if this situation is painful, it's getting you closer to purpose. And we know faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. So you just have to know in your heart. You don't have to see. You just have to know. And I promise everything will line up. You may not become an organizational leader like me. Who knows? It's exciting to know what is God going to do with you. But what I do know is that he's working in you right now. He is working in you right now, just the way he worked with me 20 years ago in that little cell. The work has already started. And I am so honored to have been able to share this space with you and to have been able to tell you my story, so that when you get out of there and, life hands you lemons, you make some sweet lemonade out of that, or God makes some sweet lemonade. Just trust that that will happen.
Amen.
Just keep the faith.
Well, before we leave today, Valeria, would you mind praying over our guests and our listeners today?
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, Father God, I come to you today with a humble heart and just a spirit of gratitude, Lord. This opportunity that you have given me to be able to talk to my fellow brothers and sisters who are currently experiencing what I experienced so many years ago, and just almost just kind of like being a voice from the future for them, that lets them know that you are present in any and all circumstances, that there is nothing that they cannot do through Christ Jesus, to remind them, to not be afraid, to not be dismayed, for you are with them. You said you would strengthen them. You would uphold them with your righteous right hand. And I believe in that. And I am a testimony to that. And I am a testimony to your providence. And I am a testimony to your goodness. And I am a testimony to how you can turn the darkest of circumstances and the outcasts of the world into leaders and warriors. I am proof of that. And I thank you, Lord, that you have given me a platform where I can share that, where I can share to look out for the angels that you put in our path, and to just be open to life, the good and the hard, because it's all working in our favor as long as we serve you. So Father, I pray that you keep this in their heart, that you fill them with hope and inspiration, and that you light a fire and a passion in their soul to keep going, because there is no limit to what you can do through us. And for that, Father, we thank you, and we do so in the name of your precious Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Valeria. And thank you, guests, for tuning in again today for another episode. I hope you were blessed by Valeria's testimony. And if you would like to reach out to her, or if you would like to reach out to us, as always, you can write to us at Story of Grace Prison Ministry, P.O. Box 13, Lexington, Tennessee, 38351. And we wish you a wonderful and blessed day. We're praying for you. We believe in you. And we'll see you next time on Free on the Inside podcast. Goodbye.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you were blessed by the show. If you would like to reach out to any of our guests, or if you would like to make a personal request for prayer, you can write to us at Story of Grace Prison Ministry, Post Office Box 13, Lexington, Tennessee, 38351. We read every letter and take every request to God in prayer. You are loved and you are seen. We hope you will join us next time on the Free on the Inside podcast. Goodbye.